On today's episode, we're going to empty the compost tumbler. Hi, it's Josh and welcome back to Better Terra. Today, we're talking about compost. And if you look at this bed here, you can see that it's extremely full of cucumbers. And this is a great example of not finishing a compost correctly. This is last fall's compost that I put in this bed, and it wasn't nearly close to completion. So we have all of these rogue cucumbers that came up after we pulled up the garlic this year. So in today's episode, when we empty the compost tumbler, I'm going to show you what I've done to finish this batch of compost. Let's go take a look. Today, as we're emptying the compost, I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about compost as we go. I apologize, it's a little bit windy today. I've got on the Peter Cottontail here to see if it'll block out some of the wind, but if there's some wind noise, I apologize. My plan today is to empty the compost from the tumbler into the soil sifter, and then give it a quick sift to get rid of any of the large pieces that didn't make the full compost process. And with those pieces that didn't make it, we'll put those into the next batch. I've let this batch of compost sit for a couple of weeks without adding any new material to make sure that the temperatures inside get to that high enough level to kill those seeds so they won't germinate when we add them back to the garden. That's what happened with the cucumbers there. I put those in at the end of the last year. They had enough time to break down, but not enough time to kill the seeds for germination. That temperature level has to get to about 160 degrees internal for that to happen. So stick with me, and I'm gonna go ahead and start emptying the compost. Like I said, I've let this set for a couple of weeks to make sure that it's gotten hot enough. And I've peeked inside a few times, and it really looks like it's broken down nicely. So my wheelbarrow's a little bit too tall, and my composter doesn't set up high enough to dump directly into the composter. Maybe whenever I have to replace the frame someday, I'll make it a little higher. I'm gonna start off by giving it a few good turns to make sure it's mixed really well. When I stopped adding material to this, it was fairly full, about 2/3 of the way. And that's about as full as I like to get it, to give it enough room for the material to tumble whenever I turn it. So over that time, it's broken down a lot. Right now, we're looking at a level about here. And this batch has been in the process since the very beginning of the season. Let's see how it looks. Let me bring the camera closer so you can see. As you can see here in the sifter, we get these large clumps. And this is kind of like a snowball effect. As it tumbles, these pieces tend to collect and build up. But it's just an easy, break them apart with your hand. You can see some leaf matter in there. There's some eggshell that I didn't break up well enough before putting it in, but that's all fine. It goes into the process. There's a large bit of eggshell. We'll put that into the next batch. So I'm just gonna move this around with my hands a little bit, break up those big chunks. And I always pick out the stickers. Stickers always make it that are on your store-bought fruits and vegetables. I'll make a little collection of those over here. Let me give it a quick back and forth. I don't know what this is. It's a piece of wood. Interesting. I still see lots of sticks and stuff, but these are pretty close to being fully broken down. They snap really easily. Some of them are very hollow. You know, like this. just falls apart. So we're going to work this a little bit by hand. So with compost, there's two types of processes. There's this process, which is an aerobic process that's done with the presence of oxygen, and that's why we tumble it, or stir it if you're using a pile. And that gets the oxygen mixed in with the material, so the microbes that are doing the work can use that oxygen. Another process is anaerobic, and that's composting that happens in an extremely oxygen-deprived environment.
I lost the rest of this audio, but I'll give a quick voiceover. So an example of an oxygen-deprived environment would be a muddy bog. If you've ever walked through one and it's got leaf matter under the water, you would tend to get a methane smell, and that's the byproduct of an anaerobic composting process. That's methane, and that can be used in some other applications, but it's not necessarily useful in the application in the home garden. Back to you, Josh.
This is the last batch out of the composter into the screener. This is the third screening. And I wanted to come back and talk a little bit because I'm seeing some things in here that really make a difference. So if you're running a compost tumbler, you might see what you think are maggots, and they are maggots, inside the composter. But these aren't your normal housefly maggots. These are what they're called black soldier fly maggots. And I see some of their carcasses in here. Let me see if I can pick one out. Oh, there's one. There was one. Let me see if I can find them again. Here's the carcass one. Let me make sure that this gets in focus. That's what it looks like. They're not your normal kind of housefly maggot. Those are white, kind of fat. These soldier fly maggots, they're flat. They're normally like brown, kind of leathery looking, but they do amazing work inside the compost. So they're beneficial. It's okay to see those. I know years ago when I first started doing compost in the backyard, I would find those guys and think that I was doing something wrong, that I wasn't doing the compost correctly. But these are fantastic. They help in the composting process. So enough about maggots. Here I'm finding acorns. And at the end of a whole sifter full, this is about as much uncomposted material as I'm finding. And even if I really press this a lot, it becomes even less. I find the occasional rock. That's from root masses when I pull up out of the garden and throw into the composter. But as you can see there, I worked it a little bit more. The sticks are starting to break. It almost turns into nothing. It's not really worth the extra work because I'm just going to put this a little bit into the next batch. We're completely done with the sifting, and just look at what we got. This is what we're talking about. This is super fine and decomposed material. This is compost. There's bits of eggshell, there's the maggot carcasses, and then all the leaves and garden waste and kitchen waste throughout an entire season that we've added to here. This is going to go into our fall bean planting. This is just gorgeous compost. So a little work and a little sweat, and we've got this beautiful compost. Now we have an empty composter, and it's time to start filling it. Well, luckily, I have my side barrel here that was full of leaves from last fall. And I was keeping those leaves just for this occasion because we won't have a lot of carbon material until fall comes back around. So on top of that leaf material, I've been adding all of the scraps from the kitchen and the cuttings from the garden. I haven't been sealing the lid, allowing it some air, so we don't get an anaerobic process. Now this barrel doesn't have any holes in it, so any moisture that's gone in there has stayed. And I'm hoping that's helped to get this a head start before transferring it into the other barrel. Now before I do that, I need a little bit of help, so we'll get to that later on this coming weekend when Mrs. Better Terra can come out and possibly give me a hand. With this new batch, and it being middle of the summer, I'm hoping that I can have another finished batch of compost about this size at the end of the year. And then that will go into next year's soil amendment. With that last batch of compost, I normally just bag that and put it in the shed. It's completely fine. It'll stay nice and viable through the winter. I'm noticing a little bit of sprinkles here, so I'm gonna go ahead and get the compost put away and the camera out of the rain. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please consider subscribing. And if this episode was benefit to you, click that like button. Until next time, keep on working toward a better Terra, one beautiful batch of compost at a time.